I can hear
Elizabeth,
you.
thank you. Our coverage continues here on NewsNation as it is still not contained. 0% at this hour. You are looking live right now, Los Angeles County, as for about 29 hours or so in that part of the country, that state, and Southern California specifically, on fire. What Los Angeles is braving at this moment, the worst wildfire in the history of that area. As we know it, at least 1,000 structures, many in Pacific Palisades, are gone. The fire spreading to a handful of locations in the greater Los Angeles area. They've consumed about 27,000 acres. For context here, that's about 32 times the size of Central Park. The main power company there says hundreds of thousands of people remain without power. President Biden, who happened to be in Southern California today, stopping by a firehouse in Santa Monica to receive a personal briefing. He's called on the Defense Department to provide more help. His successor, Donald Trump, arriving in Washington just a little while ago and set to meet with Senate Republicans any moment now behind closed doors. And Trump is already questioning how the insurance companies will be able to handle the catastrophe in Southern California. But tonight, lives change forever in America's largest state and second biggest metropolitan area.
This is my pride and joy, my home.
You've worked so hard, and
I worked very hard to keep this home.
When I started seeing my neighbor's home across the street go up, like I said, I try to use swimming pool water, bucket, shovel, like as if I was a firefighter, and I'm not.
And there are so many of those stories this evening. Hello, good evening. Thanks for being with us as our coverage continues here on NewsNation. I'm Blake Berman. If you were watching us this time last night, 24 hours ago, you'll remember our Nancy Liu was with us throughout the entire hour as we watched, alongside with Nancy, home after home burn. At that time, it was 770 acres. Fast forward the clock, tonight, those fires, plural, some 27,000 acres, 35 times the size than when we first spoke with our Nancy Liu, who joins us live once again here on the Hill. Nancy, fantastic reporting. Where are you right now? What has it been like where you are this evening?
Blake, we're in Altadena, which is just north of Pasadena. This is where the Eaton fire is and where there are 2 confirmed fatalities. This fire is over 10,000 acres. This morning I was over at the Palisades fire, which is well over 15,000 acres at this point. And I just want to show you a small slice of the devastation here in Southern California. As you may know, I visited Lahaina at the 6-month anniversary of the horrible fire there. I can only describe what's happened in Southern California as Lahaina times 2, perhaps even 3. But behind me is a business. This is what's left of a pizzeria. And you can see there's the pizza oven right there. Behind it was a Christian fellowship center. You can see the cross there. And beyond that cross, just smoke, lots of smoke. All of downtown, much of downtown Altadena is on fire right now. Fire crews are actively working to put out flames. I saw the sheriff's department. They're trying right now to shut down Lake Avenue in downtown Altadena. I can tell you that this downtown is devastated. Downtown Pacific Palisades devastated as well. And Blake, yesterday I was describing just the apocalyptic scene, and I want to show you what the sun looks like right now here in Southern California. Look at it's so eerie, and you see that black smoke drifting across it. And Blake, the good news is that smoke is drifting slower. That means the winds, they're finally starting to calm down, and that is helping in the firefight. Blake?
Nancy, can you have your photographer, if you wouldn't mind, sort of push in? I think there was a fire there off in the distance, and I wonder how often you're seeing that through Altadena, and what it's like as you go street to street there.
Oh, this is just, That fire down the way there, Nate is pushing in on it. There are all kinds of businesses here in downtown Altadena. And, I described this earlier. This is your typical American downtown. There's a dry cleaner, there's the bank, there's a clothing store, and that's where the bulk of the smoke is coming from right now. I know that there's a restaurant down there as well as a hardware store. There's a mini market, but just your typical downtown strip. And there has been a problem here, Blake, of people driving through. So again, the Sheriff's Department is trying to shut down traffic here because so many people just want to come out and see what's left. And I have to say, earlier I saw a woman driving by and she just had her hand over her face and she was in tears looking at what's happened to downtown Altadena, Blake.
Our Nancy Liu live once again for us, this time in Altadena. Nancy, we'll see you later in the hour. Appreciate it. Over now to Tracy Park. Tracy is the LA council member that represents the Pacific Palisades region. And I see you taking a deep breath, Tracy. I really appreciate your time and joining us here tonight on News Nation. As you represent Pacific Palisades, which is where this all started, I can sense just the grief, the frustration. I'm sure you're exhausted. Where are you right now, and what's going through your mind?
All of that. It's grief, it's exhaustion. I just left downtown Palisades. I pulled over here in Santa Monica, which is now also in the process of evacuations, to do this Zoom with you. The scenes in the Pacific Palisades today are catastrophic. It's apocalyptic. It's hard to get your head around the scope of the devastation and the loss. There is still active fire burning all over the town. Our firefighters are actively working on suppression efforts and continuing to try to protect lives and what's left of property in the Pacific Palisades. But it's beyond devastating what has happened here in the last 24 hours.
You're a town of about 30,000 or so. We are hearing that more than 1,000 structures, give or take, are gone. I know one person, Tracy, who lives in the Pacific Palisades. I checked in with some friends in California today to ask about that one person, and their house is gone, I'm told. And I wonder if that's just the story that is playing over and over again, no matter where you look in your neighborhood.
Sadly, it is. I have been throughout all day yesterday, all through the night last night, and throughout the day today. I have personally been in touch with friends and constituents in the Palisades, and virtually everyone that I have spoken to is looking at a complete loss. This is absolutely devastating.
As we think about homes and lives and property, of course, we're looking at video of horses on the screen right now, just to go show the sheer depth of all this. Tracy, there was a news conference earlier today, and one of the questions was how they ran out of water starting at 3 a.m. There in the Pacific Palisades. You said the chronic underinvestment in the city of Los Angeles and our public infrastructure and our public safety partners was evident and on full display over the last 24 hours. I'm extremely concerned about this. I think we've got more questions than answers at this point. Do you have an idea of why the water went dry when it did? And looking forward, do firefighters have what they need?
So thank you for the question. Obviously, this is something that is top of mind. We were already in the middle of extremely dangerous and deadly circumstances with the dry vegetation and the wind conditions. To lose our water source on top of it, and keep in mind, we weren't able to do air suppression efforts because of the wind. And so the fact that our first responders were left to fight a raging wildfire burning through our hillsides and our town with fire hydrants in and of itself is a problem. But over the course of those hours as the water supply depleted, there was about a demand on the usual load of about 4 times. in part as people were fleeing their homes, they were leaving faucets and hoses running. So it was a perfect confluence of events coupled with the underinvestment in the critical infrastructure and the public safety resources that we need that have all created this perfect, catastrophic, and tragic storm of a reminder.
Do you have what you need right now? Obviously, we've heard and quite literally seen from the President of the United States, but we've heard from the federal government basically saying that resources are coming. The Defense Department, for example, is sending in assets, but you're a relatively small area. 27,000 acres is obviously, it's a lot, it's a big size, but your community in the Pacific Palisades, big yet small. Do you feel that you have everything that you need right now? Because again, the reminder here is none of this is contained.
That's right. And, I will say the efforts by our LA City Fire Department have been absolutely heroic these last 24 hours. But they absolutely could not have done this alone. And so we are incredibly grateful for the ongoing support that we've already had from LA County and CAL FIRE, as well as our neighboring cities and counties. As I said, I actually just left the Palisades. There are fire engines from cities all across Los Angeles County and beyond, virtually on every corner in the Palisades right now, trying to fight to save what's left of the buildings and the infrastructures, trying to save what are left of the homes. But to answer your question, are we ready and prepared right here in the city of Los Angeles for major events like this? Not without the mutual aid that we have in place, and we're not going to be able to continue these efforts and to do the recovery, the long recovery that is going to be necessary without all layers of government and all hands on deck. So we're very, very grateful to Governor Newsom for the additional support and resources that he's provided, and to President Biden as well. We are incredibly grateful, and we're not going to be able to do this without all of the help that we need.
Tracy Park represents the Pacific Palisades area there in Los Angeles, a council member. We thank you so much for joining us tonight here on News Nation. Tracy, we appreciate it. Wish you all the best. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much, and we'll look forward to beginning our recovery next.
Indeed. Well, as firefighters continue to put out the fires across Southern California, about 100 school districts in the country. Alberto, it's very nice to see you and speak with you again. We used to do this all the time way back when in Miami, and it struck me you used to deal with hurricanes and a major school system there and a much different natural event, a natural disaster there in Los Angeles tonight. What are you dealing with, and what is the challenge before you with trying to get kids at some point back into school?
Great to see you again. I'm sorry it's under these difficult circumstances. A world of difference between circumstances that we faced in South Florida, specific to hurricanes, and what we're dealing with here. Actually, we're dealing with a set of circumstances that have no precedent in the history of Los Angeles. What am I talking about? Not just one significant fire. 4 fires, maybe a 5th one that was recently reported, happening at a time of very high winds, hurricane-level winds, with a level of unpredictability specific to the movement of the dust cloud, the smoke cloud, and the cloud of ashes. That is why early this morning, looking at a radar that depicted the air quality index across Los Angeles Unified, a massive system of 720 square miles and over 1,000 schools, we decided to initially close 100 schools. We had to increase that number to 283 out of 1,000 schools and modify the schedules for an additional 90 schools.
Correct me if
Unfortunately, conditions have worsened throughout the day. When they were actually predicted to improve. The speed wind is still high. The movement of the cloud continues to shift. And in some instances, the cloud of smoke is not moving at all.
Correct.
So we are about to make decisions going into tomorrow.
Okay.
I surveyed a number of areas, and unfortunately, the area led by my dear friend Tracy Park up in the Palisades, we have 2 elementary schools that have literally burned to the ground, and a high school.
That's Palisades. That's Palisades Charter Elementary School, Marquez Charter Elementary School, as I just hear you describe it, burned to the ground. Palisades Charter.
That is correct.
Yeah, Palisades Charter High School, which is 2,900 students, give or take, significant damage. Folks might know that. That was the high school in the famed movie Grease. Is that high school survivable?
I believe that the legacy buildings, there are brick and mortar buildings, will survive, even though when I was there was an ongoing fire affecting about 30% of the school, but it was primarily impacting portable classrooms, bungalows. Those are totally lost. So about the capacity of the school, no matter what, has been reduced by at least 30%, even though the loss at the elementary schools was total. So we're working with state and federal entities, expediting resources to rebuild those schools for the benefit of our communities. And meanwhile, short term, we'll be making accommodations for those schools and those families to have a seat at a school nearby to reduce the inconvenience during this very, very trying time.
Alberto, at the end of the day, you're in the business of kids. You're in the business of children. And a lot of these kids, a lot of these children of all ages have had their lives upended. And there's going to be some really hard conversations. Mommy and Daddy, where do I go to school next?
Right.
And what do you tell those children who have just had their lives totally turned upside down?
So that's a very, very important question. Number one, kids are kids, but we need to be honest with them and have honest conversations in an age-appropriate way. We need to tell them honestly what happened, but also bring a degree of empathy and support and reassurance that within a short period of time, their lives will normalize. That maybe they will be in a different environment, but their colleagues will be there with them. Their teachers will be there with them. We'll be supporting our students, their social, emotional needs, their mental health needs. We'll be supporting also our workforce. We know in many instances our workforce members have lost their homes. I've seen pictures of employees' homes who burned to the ground. So this is a time of great need where we need to lead with courage, with empathy, with the appropriate resources, and a great deal of strategy, and there is no time to waste. We've activated a continuity of learning, no matter where students are.
Schools there are closed due to the risk in Los Angeles County. Joining me now is Alberto Carvalho. He's the superintendent of the Los Angeles Unified School District, the second largest.
They are plugged into resources for those who are kept out of school because of conditions, and we hope to resume the full potential of our school system as quickly as possible as these conditions improve.
Alberto Carvalho runs the second largest school district in this country out there in Los Angeles County. Nice to see you and speak with you, sir. Sorry under these circumstances, but I wish you all the best. Alberto Carvalho, thank you.
Thank you very much. Great to see you.
You as well. Live pictures here as we continue our coverage here on NewsNation. Home after home in many communities up in flames at this moment.
This is devastation. I have two friends that live up there. We go surfing and it's gone. I can't even imagine, what these people are going through.
Our coverage here on NewsNation continues on the other side of the break. Stay with us. Welcome back here to NewsNation as our coverage continues on the devastating wildfires in Southern California, Los Angeles County, at least 4, maybe 5 at this moment. Congressman Ami Bera was born in Los Angeles. He's a Democrat who represents the Sacramento area. Joins us live here on NewsNation with our special coverage. Congressman, this is your home state as you see this happen. What are you thinking about as you watch the devastation?
It's horrific and tragic, and our hearts go out to all the folks that are affected. This may be the worst disaster in California's history, certainly as it unfolds. We were just briefed by the Office of Emergency Services. The delegation is standing ready to get whatever emergency aid we can, not just to put out the fire, but this is going to take months and years of recovery. So. We've got to come together now as, not Democrats or Republicans, but as a country and a state to help reduce this devastation.
Did you get
the recovery effort?
Did you get anything actionable out of that briefing? Something you learned?
We did. I mean, obviously the the first responders, the firefighters, the emergency services, they understood that the winds were coming, but this was a perfect confluence of events. A fire starting in a neighborhood where all of a sudden you have to switch to saving lives, which is appropriate, getting people out of there. And I've been in the Palisades area. If you've been in that part of LA County, these are narrow roads, winding roads, and so forth. The fact it's a testimony to them that thus far we've only heard about 2 deaths. And unfortunately, there may be more, but the fact that they were able to get people to safety, they are getting the fixed wing aircraft up in the air.
Yeah, we just saw some of that.
That's going to be incredibly important, helping contain this. They're getting the helicopters up in the air. There are units moving in from Washington and Oregon to come help combat the fire. But right now, this is not contained at all. So, the winds may die down within the next 24 hours, and hopefully that's the case. Hopefully God's with us on that, and we get to a place where we can start to contain this and start to bring an end to these fires.
Congressman Barra represents part of California, more so in the middle part of the state, but obviously a part of the delegation there, receiving a briefing this afternoon, as he tells us, joining us live here for our coverage. Congressman, thanks for jumping on short notice. We appreciate you, sir.
Thank you for having me on. Be well.
You got it. Still much more ahead here on the other side of the break. By the way, Donald Trump up on Capitol Hill today, meeting with Republican senators. Do we have a sense of what he might have told them? Plus, he's jumping in the middle of the political fray here as well, taking on Gavin Newsom as we continue our live coverage. And my gosh, look at that. A live look there in Southern California, the way it has been now for more than a day. Our coverage continues here on NewsNation, 6:30 here on the East Coast, 3:30 in Los Angeles County, California, as the wildfires there continue to rip through that area. Here is what we know at this moment: a handful of active fires right now, over 27,000 acres burned. At least 5 are now dead. There is a high number of significant injuries as well. At least 80,000 people, though the number might be higher than that, evacuated. And this is the number that hasn't changed over the last 24 hours. 0% containment. None of it. Our Nancy Liu has been on the ground all day. She was with us. If you were watching us here last night at about this time, you saw Nancy going from home to home to home in Pacific Palisades. She is in, I believe, Altadena, that community there where another fire's broken out.
Yeah, this is the Eaton fire, as you know, Blake, and we are keeping our distance as advised because behind me, that building on fire is a martial arts center, but next to that, closer to us, that is a nail salon. So you can imagine the flammable materials that are within that building. Earlier, we did see fire crews trying to put water on it and trying to contain it. And now they've kind of left and they're allowing it to burn out. But we're also, I know earlier, Blake, I showed you the pizza restaurant that had burned out as well, and the whole place is leveled. I want to show you, this is like a can from inside that restaurant. From time to time, there are exploding cans of food flying at us. So another reason to keep our distance from what remains of a lot of homes and businesses. It's still a very volatile and dangerous situation, both here at the Eaton fire as well as over to the west at the Palisades fire. Blake?
Our Nancy Liu live for us once again in Altadena, the community there in Los Angeles. Nancy, thank you. Kelly Meyer, NewsNation Washington correspondent, joins me live. Kelly, President Biden just so happened to be in California today.
Yeah.
He made a stop in Santa Monica at a firehouse. What's he saying? What's the White House saying tonight?
Yeah, and it's so interesting that he was there at this moment. He just came from New Orleans, where he was acting as this consoler-in-chief.
Yeah.
Then he comes out to California, and this happened. So he was able to go to the fire station to get that briefing alongside Governor Newsom. They are surging federal assistance, they say, to local firefighters. He just declared a major disaster declaration in California. So what that means, it will allow survivors to immediately access funds and resources to jumpstart their recovery. And in addition to that, he's also making sure that there are 5 U.S. Forest Service large air tankers with another tanker en route. That will help put out, hopefully, a lot of this, or some of this blaze, at least. As you said, there's zero containment at this moment. He's also sending Navy helicopters with water buckets en route from San Diego, so involving the Department of Defense in this as well. So it's something that he is going to continue monitoring. That's the list of things, the actions that the federal government has taken so far. He is making his way back to Washington, D.C., but of course, trying to do whatever they can from the federal government perspective to add help. And we're seeing other governors step up, too, like Ron DeSantis assisting.
Kelly Meyer, live for us. Kelly, thank you. As we continue to keep our eyes there, keep in mind this fire right now is 27,000 acres. As we watch, as Nancy Liu reported, another business burn. For context, Central Park is 873 acres. This is 35, basically, Central Parks between Pacific Palisades, Altadena, and the other fires that are ripping through Southern California at this hour, and have been doing so for more than 24 hours now. Up to Capitol Hill, our congressional correspondent Joe Khalil reporting on how members of Congress are reacting to all of this. Joe, California, biggest state, biggest delegation.
Yeah, a lot of members here, and what they are doing now is to try to be the go-between, essentially, between the folks that are on the ground, they're actually still in the path of the fire, and federal agencies who can offer help. If you're there, if you need a place to go, if you've lost your home, you can reach out to your congressional rep. That is what they're for. Eventually, they're going to be the ones to help connect that federal disaster relief money as well to people who are entitled to it, who have lost their homes and who have lost more. We talked to Congressman Brad Sherman today, who represents a large part of this area where this fire is still burning. He says his warning to everybody there in the path is to heed those calls from your law enforcement, from your emergency responders, to get out when they tell you to.
This was unprecedented. These winds are unprecedented. This combination that we have of tinder dry conditions on the one hand, but a lot of growth from 12 months ago when we had a wetter season. This is a perfect storm.
And he's going back there tonight, Blake.
Hey, Joe, Donald Trump, not far from where you are right now. Why is he there?
Yeah, so they're going over now. Donald Trump, by the way, first trip back to Capitol Hill since he won. He's meeting with Republican senators right now. They're discussing the path forward on his agenda. Big questions are, they're going to try to do this in a way that avoids needing Democratic votes. They can do that, but do they do in one big bill or two big bills? He actually says it doesn't really matter. This is what he said.
We're looking at the one bill versus two bills, and whatever it is, doesn't matter. We're going to get the result, and we're going to make America great again, and we'll see you in a little while.
Are you So, Blake, Republican leaders in House and Senate, they've got different views on how to move forward. But again, President Trump saying as long as the agenda goes forward, that's what's important here.
Joe Kay, live in the Capitol hallways for us once again. Joe, thank you. Joining me now here as our coverage continues on NewsNation is Congressman Greg Murphy. He is a Republican who represents parts of North Carolina. Congressman, thanks for being with us here on the Hill tonight as we continue to keep our eyes on the skies there in Southern California. This is the opposite side of the country from where you live. Yeah. But unfortunately, you have different but familiar experience with this, given what North Carolina just recently went through.
Sure. You know, I live in the western part of the state, and we're, sadly enough, used to hurricanes that come and attack us in the east. The thing is, we have days to prepare for these. And what's happened out in California, what happened actually in Western North Carolina, people didn't have any time to prepare. And so, there are things that you can do during that period of time, batteries, resources, move away from the coast to get away from the dangerous conditions. But it's just tragic to see the absolute engulfment of that part of the country.
They are going to need help. Yeah. I was talking to Tracy Park, who is a local council member from Los Angeles who represents Pacific Palisades at the top of the show. Yeah. And she basically said, look, we're going to need help. And that's obvious. And we saw the back and forth that played out here with money for your state, and Tennessee and other states in the Southeast. It took a lot of time. Should the folks there be optimistic?
Well, I think so. I mean, look, at the bottom line, why is the government here? It's to provide safety and security for the people of its country. Some of the issues we've had now with the insurance industry pulling out of those areas, they're trying to pull out of so many coastal areas because of the history of hurricanes. We have to deal with what's happening first, and that's making sure people are safe. Recovery is going to be a long time in coming.
Is there anything you can do about the insurance issue? At the end of the day, they're private businesses.
They are, and they're in there to make a profit, and they're to lower their risks. I get it. But there are federal programs, federal flood insurance program. But I mean, also, we have to have some state responsibility here. And I'm not blaming things on California, but California, and Governor Newsom, for that fact, has resisted any type of forest management program. We passed a bipartisan bill. Good Lord, even Nancy Pelosi voted for it to fix the forest, to try to do some type of management for these. And while this probably isn't germane necessarily to this discussion, it is germane to what happens in California routinely with forest fires.
The disaster relief fund with FEMA went dry. It was going to be in the negative had Congress not passed the give or take $100 billion. Where is FEMA right now, and how concerned are you that you might need to be going back at this again?
Well, I think we will be. I mean, good Lord, I saw one estimate a little while ago that this is already up to $60 billion. I don't know how you make that estimate already, but as you said, it's huge.
But some in your party want to pay for it instead of just taking care of.
Yeah, and I get it. Look, Blake, we're dealing with a horrible, horrible thing that is approaching us with our debt. It is we are comparatively worldwide in a tremendous precarious situation, and we have to be responsible where we've not been responsible before about spending. That said, these are emergencies. These are not things that benefits. These are not something that are long term. This is something literally to get people their life and limb back to them.
Yeah, I mean, look at that. It is just, Congressman, I was sitting here at 6 Eastern all hour last night and just watching this, and here we are, 6 Eastern, 3:40 out there in California, and it's 0% contained. Congressman Greg Murphy from the state of North Carolina, thanks for being with us. Thanks for coming in. Appreciate it. Still to come here on the Hill as our coverage continues on NewsNation. Donald Trump up on Capitol Hill today, meeting with Republican senators. But he had a little bit of a back and forth today with the California Governor Gavin Newsom. What he had to say as our coverage continues, as we keep our eyes on Southern California and the devastation there. As our coverage continues on NewsNation, live pictures in Southern California as a handful of fires continue now, really approaching onto its 30th hour, give or take, with none of this contained. 27,000 square acres burning at this moment. We are told 5 people, according to authorities, are dead as a result of these fires, though they are expecting many, many more injuries beyond that. The Pacific Palisades area and surrounding communities, at least 1,000 structures gone in Pacific Palisades, according to all the reports and folks that we have talked to. Most everything there is gone or close to burned. Joining me now here as our coverage continues, Mick Mulvaney, NewsNation contributor, former Trump White House chief of staff, Julia Manchester, national political reporter for TheHill.com, Chris Steyerwalt is a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, host of The Hill Sunday, and Dan Cannonen, Battleground States Director for both the Biden and Harris campaigns. Thank you all for being here as we continue our coverage on NewsNation with what's happening in California. There was a little bit of a political fight, Mick. Not fight, but at least starting to lay the framework here. Donald Trump today, Gavin Newsom refused to sign the water restoration declaration put before him that would have allowed millions of gallons of water from excess rain and snowmelt from the north to flow daily into many parts of California. He is to blame for this. He's going after Newsom. He's going after Biden.
Politics is real. It has an impact on people's lives. It's probably not the best time to have the discussion, but at some point we're going to have a discussion about how California got to where it is. Yes, this is a natural disaster. Yes, there are acts of God. I get all of that. But I was talking to a friend of mine today who was in the state legislature, a Democrat, who said, look, back 10, 20 years ago, they were trying to work with Governor then Arnold Schwarzenegger to do a bond for water infrastructure, and a Democrat admitted a far left environmentalist in California killed it. And there are repercussions to that. Politics is a real business with real impacts on real people, and you're seeing some of it today.
Climate change is a major impact on wildfires. 30% more intense, many more wildfires spreading beyond 10,000 acres in the last 20 years than previous. And not just in California, but across the country now in places that did not have wildfires. There are zoning issues. There are forest management issues. There's $1.5 billion in relief, by the way, from the bipartisan infrastructure law, bipartisan, to California for wildfire mitigation. This is a very real issue. This is a thing that takes time for people to come together, both on water issues, on whether it's conservation or whether it's on the mitigation standpoint. But this stuff is going to get worse and worse and worse because the air is getting hotter. It sucks the moisture out of the forests. It makes it a tinderbox. Whether there's overdevelopment, it just explodes this stuff through these areas. And we have to be prepared in the future for more of this kind of horrific scene, unfortunately.
The thing that I don't understand, Julia, and there'll be lots of questions, is how they ran out of water there in the fire hydrants at 3 in the morning.
Yeah.
I talked to the council member from Pacific Palisades in the Los Angeles area. She was exhausted, as you might imagine. She was upset, and there's going to be questions here as we watch some of the fixed-wing aircraft come in and the fire retardant being laid down. There's going to be a lot of questions here about what happened beyond the natural causes.
Exactly. In terms of those preventative measures, I talked with a former Democratic assemblyman from California earlier today, and he said heads should roll following this. Not just, I'm not talking about Gavin Newsom, but this goes all the way down to the local level. This is local and state. I think we're going to hear there's going to be, obviously a review of this. We'll find out, more going forward. But shifting back to the political lens of this, look, when it comes to Newsom versus Trump, we've known for so long that with Republicans holding control of both houses of Congress, Democrats in these states are really on the front lines. So it makes sense, or it doesn't make sense, but, Trump going after Newsom is definitely certainly a punch there. What I thought was interesting, though, is that you saw Florida Governor Ron DeSantis offer aid to Florida earlier today. We've seen Gavin Newsom do the same thing when it comes to a hurricane. These two political rivals sort of, showing some bipartisanship during a really dark time.
And it wasn't that long ago, sorry, Chris, that Trump threatened to withhold aid from California if he didn't get Newsom to act as he wanted politically. So there's a distinction here.
Trump, I also heard Joe Biden basically say if Trump was reelected again, that none of this would happen, right? He put a lot of this on Trump's plate, and here we are.
You got to read his truth as he wrote it. Governor Gavin Newsom. Because he's scum, right? The way that you can tell whether a politician is trying to solve a problem or take advantage is where do they start? And if they start with a personal attack and they start with blaming other people, then you have a pretty good idea that this is not constructive. Now, there is a huge political liability, and it's California, so it's a huge political liability for Democrats, and Julia alluded to it. Karen Bass, the mayor of Los Angeles, is facing a terminal, potentially, political crisis. In her first budget, they cut funding for the fire department.
Right, $17 million.
More than that. Why doesn't the fire hydrant system work? Why doesn't the infrastructure work?
Basic questions.
And where is she? She's out of she was on a trip to.
They have recall elections for mayor.
They certainly do for some governmental officials. I assume they have them for mayors as well.
And that's the issue here, right? Is that some of this is the fault of the people who are there now. There's no question. But a lot of it has to fall to the people who are no longer in elected office. These are decisions that were made 20 years ago, 30 years ago. You don't get to this place since Karen Bass got elected. Yes, the people who are running the place should be there doing as good a job as they can, but there are decisions being made in this building right now behind us that won't be felt for 30 years. We're dealing with things right now that are the result of decisions that were made 30 years ago, and it's really hard to sort of translate that into who gets blamed.
Dan, before we run, you were the Battleground States Director for both Kamala Harris at the end, Joe Biden at the beginning. Big interview out today with President Biden, in which he says he believed that if he had stayed in the race, he would have won, and said that polling told him so.
Look,
Did you ever have polling that told you that Joe Biden was going to win when he dropped out?
In a nutshell, Blake, I think the case that we had going forward was that Donald Trump was going to be unpopular because he was too toxic, that the record the Democrats ran on was popular, and empirically the policies that Joe Biden enacted were popular with the voters as we saw them. And that as time went on, people would see the felonies, they'd see the chaos, they'd be reminded of Trump, and the president thought he could win on that basis. I understand why he thinks that. I understand the presidents never believe that they're not going to win. It's why he ran in the first place. He believed he could win, and he was the guy to do it. I think that if he was the top of the ticket versus Kamala Harris, who did an excellent job performing over 107 days, I don't see how that changes the outcome.
It wouldn't change the outcome.
I think the problem where Democrats need to reconcile is that Donald Trump was just more popular. He wasn't toxic to the American people. He had the highest approval ratings in this campaign, higher than he had when he was president, when he ran the first time. Right. And that was not the proposition we thought we'd be entering in the campaign.
To be clear, I didn't hear you say, yes, you had internal polling, as Joe Biden suggests, that showed him winning when he dropped out.
We had a lot of polling that showed that we had a path to victory. We thought we were on track to win the entire time, Blake, and we ran a campaign with that in mind.
Should Joe Biden have said that today, or whenever he gave that interview?
I think probably at this point folks want to turn the page, and I think that's what we should do. But I understand the president has worked hard, has had a great legacy and a great set of accomplishments. I get it.
A remarkably graceless note for the president to conclude his term on, to leave some doo-doo on Kamala Harris's doorstep.
What did he say today? He said, I'll remember today because my great-grandchild was born. That's what he's going to remember today for? I mean, that's...
To say that he would have won after Kamala Harris lost is a graceless thing to do to your vice president.
That's true.
Got to run the other side of the break. Our coverage continues here on NewsNation. Stay with us. Leland Vittert, other side.
Harumph.
Our breaking news coverage continues. I'm Blake Berman, joined by Leland Vittert, host of On Balance, as we continue to keep our eyes on Southern California, Pacific Palisades, Altadena, and several of the other communities there. Live pictures there. Leland, this has been the scene now. It is horrific that this has been the scene. We talked about this last night at this exact same time, and it is still 0% contained.
0%, which I think is the number to keep in mind. We can see it continuing to grow, and precisely zero solutions to the biggest problem, which is there is no water.